Combined, Kate and Jeff have approximately 65 years of experience in human-computer interaction, which qualifies their experience for Social Security about. Please join me in welcoming this month's pair of speakers.
So I'm Kate Finn, and this is Jeff Johnson, and together we are Wiser Usability. I didn't realize we had so many decades of experience between us, but I'll be filling out the paperwork for those benefits soon. Jeff and I have both worked in user interface design and usability evaluation for apparently a number of decades. And as we watched our own parents and other relatives aging, we also watched them having increasing problems using technology and needing increasing help with it. And we decided to put our usability expertise together with a sensibility toward the needs of older users. And that's why we created Wiser Usability 2 years ago. All right. So here's a teaser clip. It's a kind of to set the tone. I hope the audio works. And it sums up the user experience of many of the participants that we had in a study. We conducted a study on travel websites. I want to point out before you hear this that the thing about the websites that we studied, is they were all geared toward older travelers. And older travelers were supposed to navigate the sites and select and book their trips from there. But I'm not getting a little...
At this point,
Okay, sorry.
I would call them. This is so overwhelming.
Okay.
I would call them and
Back it up.
at this point, I would call them. This is so overwhelming.
Okay.
I would call them and say, help.
I would call them and say help. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. Okay. So I'm going to, just to let you know, I'm going to be talking about the first two sections, and then Jeff will be covering the second two sections. And the main things that we hope you'll come away from tonight's presentation with are an understanding of the numbers and percentages of older adults online, and that both of those are steadily increasing, and awareness of some of the challenges that older adults face while they're using websites or any other technical interface, guidelines to use in designing designing age-friendly websites, and considerations for conducting usability studies with older adults. I won't be turning pages all night long. So as a bit of background, I wanted to go over, review with you the projected age demographics and talk about who's doing what online and why age-friendly website design is so important. First, the exciting pictures here. This chart shows the relative distribution of the U.S. population by age, and it is pretty similar to other developed countries around the world. You can see that the youngest cohorts, does it work? Yeah, I don't know why they broke it into only a 4-year-old one and then 5 to 19 on this particular data set, but I was having trouble with Excel as it was, so I didn't combine things. But you can see that the little guys are kind of flatlined here, and the younger adults, or kids and younger adults, are not doing much. But the olders are going, the middle ones are going down, the 20 to 44, and we're right here at the peak of the 45 to 64-year-olds, and that's going to start decreasing. But the two oldest cohorts, they're going to be increasing. So from 2010 to 2030, the steepest increase is the 65 to 85-year-olds, and then in 20 years, as the 65 to 84-year-olds turn 85 and older, that line starts going up. And it's a little bit more dramatic if you look at it in the change of distribution of the age groups. So again, here's the currently the 65 to 84-year-olds, the baby boomers, and then bam, around 2030, they triple in their distribution. The numbers of them triple. The two oldest ones grow 50% in the next 20 years, and then the 85-year-olds own the show. They just take off from there. This is a different data set, and it shows who's online. I see someone forgot to fix the apostrophes on here. Excel has a thing about us and our apostrophes, and it likes it on our computer, but then when we show it, it puts this extra space here. So here's from the Pew Internet and American Life Project surveys, great source of information for the demographics of who's online. And as you can see, every single age group of here, and there's just the 4 age groups, all of them have increased from 2000 to 2012. And you've got your 18 to 29-year-olds and 30 to 49s right up there at 91, 97%. But in the last 3 years, the steepest increase has been in these oldest 2 groups. So as of April of last year, the 50 to 64-year-olds were at 77%. 77% of 50 to 64-year-olds were online. And the 65-year-olds were even at a steeper rate of increase. So I don't know, I think another 10 years they'll be maybe not all be caught up. I just don't want you to ignore older people, because sometimes people think that older users are not online, and that's just not true. Right. So if you're in marketing, or if you yourself are in the AARP cohort, you're probably familiar with all the statistics and news articles that come out, such as beginning in January of 2011 and continuing for the next 20 years, every day in this country, 10,000 people turn 65 every day for the next 20 years. That's a lot of people. And then they'll be turning, 85. Or you see lots of statistics about how many more people are online, older people are online, are buying smartphones. AARP loves to cite this stuff. How many people have bought tablets, and what they're doing, they're playing video games, they're Facebooking, and they're, setting up their own entrepreneurial businesses and things. But apart from all that, in case you want, you can buy at this website a converter kit for your Underwood typewriter to put your iPad on it. But besides that, what are people really doing online? Older people really doing online? It turns out that they're doing much the same as their younger counterparts. So in this is also, it's derived from the, what did I do? Is it gone? There it is. It's derived from another Pew Internet study, but they divided the population into 6 age groups. Everybody seems to divide them differently. And they had a huge, it went like all the way out to the door, the list of what people do by favorite activity. But the 7 most common online activities are represented here. Email, general search, health information, getting general news, making travel arrangements, visiting government sites, and online purchases. But the interesting thing to me was that the ranking is the same, especially for the top 3. Every single group, the top 3 are email, general search, and getting health information. And the rest of these, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's not that much of a difference. So what this means to me is that most people are doing, okay, except for Vines and Twitter and lots of YouTube things, most people are doing a lot of the same things. So if you're designing sites or applications for any of these very common areas, you need to consider that you'll be designing for people of all age groups, including up to the to this oldest group that's listed here. And for all ages, you can see this is the ranking of them. Does that make sense? That makes sense. So here's why here's why we're in business, is why design age-friendly websites? Well, or any, when I say websites here, I mean anything like your phone application or any application, any online application, any interface could be plugged in there. So we've seen that there's an increasing number of older adults online, and they're online doing a lot of the same things as other people, and really they're online a lot. Aging. With a little luck, aging is a condition that all of us will get to embrace and enjoy, and so it's in your own best interest to design for older people. And I hope you can agree that better usability results in more successful users, that they have less frustration, they're more satisfied, they're more likely to click through to complete a transaction, to revisit a website, to recommend a website to their friends. So that's in your own best interest too if you're a website designer. And I think there's an argument to be made that older adults stand to be the greatest potential beneficiaries of good web design and the biggest victims of poor web design. If you think of quite older adults, and they may be socially isolated, not have any transportation, not have, they may have one or more impairments that restrict their abilities to things. The web, the internet, is a huge open window to them and enables them to participate in a lot more of life in the world than they would otherwise be able to. And not just older adults, but populations with similar issues. They have the same usability problems, and they stand to have the same benefits from websites that we would recommend. Such populations include those with low vision or other impairments, somebody with low computer expertise, maybe they didn't get it on their job training, or they're just, sidelining from their grandkids helping them. People with low literacy, which I think currently constitutes almost 50% of the US population, and non-native speakers of the target language. All of these people run into the same usability problems as older adults, and all of them would benefit from similar remediations as those that we recommend for older adults. We really don't want to see any of these people excluded from the experience, okay? This isn't set up in speaker mode. Can I quit out of this and go into a different view mode? I need it to be in view speaker mode. Presenter tools. Is this one? There. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm going to give you a little overview of the older adult web user, what might distinguish them from their younger counterparts, and look at it from the perspective of some of the common age-related changes and disorders that affect these people, us, the impact these changes have on their web usage, and some characteristics of older web users that we've noticed in our work. Now, this is a table I created from a health statistic, National Health Survey. They do a huge phone survey, and they ask people all kinds of questions, including about self-reported impairments. And the three I wanted to focus on were fine motor, vision, and hearing. And so they broke it down into these three groups, and these are the percents of adults in the US with these impairments that self-identified as having them. And what you probably are not surprised is that, well, hearing has the most people who are affected by that, and that in each age group, as you get older, there are more people self-reporting that. And then you get up to hearing with people 65 and up is almost 40%. But I think if you put numbers to it, it looks a little more daunting. There are about 5 million people with fine motor impairments, and these are of all ages together, 20 million with vision impairments, and almost 40 million people in the country with hearing impairments. So there are two things to think about, two things I think that make this even more painful, if you will. And that is that of the vision and hearing people, these people may already have had corrective eyewear or corrective hearing devices and still could not see text or hear normal conversation. So even though they had some correction in place, they were having a substandard experience. And also older people being more likely to develop multiple impairments. Almost 20% of Americans 70 years old and older have dual sensory impairments, so they're doubly affected by this. So I'm going to look at these impairments bit by bit, or these modalities and cognition, starting with vision. Now, the first thing that many people ask when I say I'm working on making websites more friendly for older users is, do you make bigger text? Well, certainly vision is a primary sense that sighted people use when experiencing a website. And there are a lot of age-related vision disorders, and they include glaucoma, macular degeneration, cataracts, diabetic retinopathy, presbyopia, things that most of us have never heard of. And they can all result in a number of some of them result in changes that can affect your web experience, including those listed here, some of which I'm going to illustrate in a second. But also, this general thing is visual tasks are more demanding and time-consuming. Even if you can get through it, it's more arduous for you. You might give up sooner. It takes you longer to do it. So the next few slides after Bing show sample web pages with and without the effects of age-related vision problems. And I've tried to stay on the, I've gotten 6, I think, of the 7 most common tasks that people do. And then Jeff will show some examples of travel. So it's all the others. And I do want to say that most of these were done from various online simulation kits. I didn't just make them up. So there's some online simulation tools to mimic the effects of these disorders. So this is Bing. Search is on maintaining mental acuity, something I look up once or twice a week. And here we see it with a moderate case of macular degeneration. Age-related macular degeneration, or AMD, affects 2 million people over the age of 50 in this country, and it affects the part of the eye responsible for the central vision, and it causes blurring or darkness in an irregular shape around it, and it also can affect the ability to see fine detail. Now, it doesn't just look like this on every page, and it's just not a static thing, because it tracks, the dark area tracks, where the focus of your eye is. So the next slide is my attempt to mimic this. So this is what happens if you try and focus on anything. You can't sneak around. I do see my mom, who's got macular degeneration, holds a book and she tries to read it like that, but I think it only works kind of. So yeah, you can't just get by with sneaking it like that. Here's a picture of a simulation of diabetic retinopathy. It's one of several versions of several vision diseases that are associated with diabetes. There's diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, and cataracts. The effects vary. It's got this kind of Dalmatian patchy version in this one. They float around your field. They can get better or worse throughout the day. You may not have heard of this, but it really is a big deal for people with diabetes. And as we have all heard, the incidence of diabetes is really on the increase in this country. So of the 10 million Americans over the age of 40 with diabetes, almost half, or 5 million, either have this disease or are at risk for developing it. That's bad news. And then here's a moderate case of glaucoma. It's kind of the opposite of macular degeneration. The periphery gets dark, and it gets darker down like that. And there's 2.3 million Americans over the age of 40 with this one. So that's the most depressing part. Now, here we have Social Security, a popular site with older Americans. I'm sure, normal, no blur. This is what it looks like. And it's a big improvement over what it used to look like. Now, if you have a severe blur, this is what it looks like. And you may just be guessing what any of these are. And sometimes people go, well, get glasses, This is not a matter of getting glasses, because a lot of people's blurred vision is a transient thing. It's because of high blood pressure or medication side effects. They come and go throughout the day, or you get used to the medication, or you've got high blood sugar and you need to take a few weeks to get your blood sugar back in whack. So yeah, glasses won't really do much for you. Here's Gmail this is my Gmail account, sanitized for this presentation. This shows no glare sensitivity. Glare sensitivity is most common in people with light-colored irises. I have green eyes. I have it. My mother has a really severe case of it where we have to close the blinds and curtains where she is because it's painful to her. So it creates almost a halo effect around a bright spot. There's bleeding glare outside the source of the light spot that makes it very difficult to see areas around it. Here is my version, which I edited in iPhoto because I couldn't find a good simulator, but I brightened everything up, and you can see how there's a lot missing. All the little, if you're familiar with Gmail, there's checks, stars, and flags that go all over here. And then here is something that says, oh, this is messages 1 to 50 of whatever. And the scroll bar here has almost disappeared. And I honestly don't remember what's here, but it's gone. It's gone if you have glare sensitivity. So you need to factor that in if you're designing for all these types of visual disorders. And then cataracts, yeah, another diabetic related disorder. So here's Doctor Who being searched for on Amazon. It was hard to choose between Game of Thrones and Doctor Who, but this was more interesting to look at. And this is moderate cataracts. Cataracts typically cause yellowing and blurring. So the distinction is less between close colors, like maybe the grays here are not as salient as they would be otherwise. And just general blurring, so the actual text is not going to be as succinct. And there are 22 million Americans over the age of 40, and 50% of Americans over the age of 80 suffer from cataracts, although and Jeff is a happily recovered cataract sufferer. So you can usually get surgery for replacing the lens in that. And coming down on the end of it, normal color reception. This is the Mayo Clinic with normal color reception. And then deuteranopia is the most common color blindness in this country. I don't know about other countries. 8% of males and 0.5% of females of Northern European ancestry in this country have this. But you can see it's a little harder to distinguish these from the background and pick these gray things out from the gray background they're on. And again, it's more tiring to look at this kind of stuff over a long period of time. And then contrast sensitivity. I think contrast sensitivity is a normal aging process. It's not necessarily associated with any diseases, but it's just part of the whole package there. This is the New York Times. And here it is if you have dimmer contrast sensitivity. And the thing that's interesting to me is that I've noticed a trend in websites they think that black is gauche. I mean, usually black is cool, but on websites there's a lot of gray text now. And then if you have something like someone's byline, it's in even paler gray text. And I don't have the clinical data for this, but I think that's very difficult for people with low contrast sensitivity to pick this out. And also here, this stuff is blue. It doesn't really look blue compared to this black. So another point to keep in mind. All right, so obviously there's a lot of ways a user's experience of a website can be less than visually optimal. And another ability that's often affected by aging is fine motor control. There are several age-related disorders that can cause fine motor control problems, such as arthritis, biggest one, Parkinson's, and essential tremor. And in addition to those medical conditions, many medicines as a side effect cause some tremor. And those can give you problems manipulating small objects like a mouse or keyboard. They reduce your eye-hand coordination, make your joints stiff. And the increase in hand tremor, I see this a lot with the people I work with. Well, I don't see this a lot, but I see hand tremor a lot. This is a diagnostic test. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. It's called an Archimedes spiral. And this patient on the left can draw this nice, fine, coiled spiral. They have no tremor. The person on the right is a patient with essential tremor, and this is their best guess, their best effort at drawing that spiral. So you can imagine the difficulties they would have in manipulating a mouse, or especially selecting a tiny little target on something, or using the keyboard. Yeah. And I tutor seniors in iPad use at a retirement community. And is there anyone here from Apple? I don't know why people think iPads are so great for seniors, because I sit there and watch these people. They go like this, and this, and this, and they're just trying to they're trying to tap a button, trying to mark it, and they can't get there. So, yeah. And the other thing with mouse is they put the cursor right over where they want, and then they go click. And that happens a lot. There was one woman told me it was because she didn't have enough coffee, but I think it was something else. She's trying to cover up for herself. So that's motor control. Here's everybody's favorite, another issue. There are normal cognitive changes that occur with aging. Nothing really to look forward to, but there are normal ones, and that's opposed to things like mild cognitive impairment, medication-caused memory loss, and actual dementia. So cognitive changes, all of these, adversely impact web use in many ways. They can cause any of these effects, reduce short-term memory, making it harder to recall your web navigation or other steps, being more distractible, difficulty retrieving words, that's me, and being more easily overwhelmed by confusing sites. As an example, this is drugstore.com. Drugstore.com is very popular with people who are at home ordering medications, ordering pharmaceuticals. Look at this site. I hope nobody here is involved with this site. There's a lot going on here. It's visually clashing. The colors are all over the place. There's a ton of calls to action. You got here, you got menus here, you got menus here, and apparently here. And I don't even know what these are down here. So this is, someone lands on this page and they don't know where to start. And no one here is from Yahoo, I'm sure. I don't know that. But this is the above the fold page of the yahoo.com website. And I had read a few years ago, somebody wrote a thing and they said, there's 240 places to click on Yahoo, it's crazy. And I thought, that can't be right. So I got on there. And there are 90 places to click above the fold. There are 300 links on the full page to click. And if you scroll, and we all know above the fold and scrolling, you have to scroll 23 times down to get to the bottom of this page. And there are over 400 clickable links if you count all the little things that pop up if you mouse over something. There's your share and your Twitter link and blah, 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 blah. Seems a little excessive to me. Okay. Hearing starts to decline at about age 50. Almost half the people in this country, 61 to 80, have some hearing loss. 93% of people over the age of 81 have it. And you think, yeah, who cares? It's hearing, It's not just listening to podcasts or music. It's not just watching TV shows online or movies. You also, we use it for confirmation feedback, mouse clicks, error sound clues. Of course, you probably all know to not depend on just that one modality for indicating an error. But this is something I thought was ironic, and this is the AARP site, had a lovely spread, or whatever, video on recareering. And I thought that it was funny on the comments. It said, captions on your videos, please. Older folks often have hearing problems. And I was just thinking, you'd think that AARP would have kind of picked up on that. So this was 2.5 years ago. I went back to the site, and they do have a lot of things that are captions, but what they are is Spanish cooking shows with English subtitles or vice versa. It's not that their general video clips have captions. So, and I don't know where things stand with Netflix. YouTube? Isn't YouTube? But they are now, right? But wasn't there a legal thing? Huh? On everything? On all the user provided content? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do the mic.
Oh.
This is the only mic, I know, but you're on your own.
I'm on my own mic.
Right. You were saying? You want to record
It's done dynamically, but it's machine attempts at
It's machine
translation.
generated? Uh-huh.
Yes, this is an amazing project, but it's not perfect.
All those cat videos or?
You can choose to ask for them to be
Really?
be captioned.
It says meow on it. Okay. All right. So there, we move a lot between usability and accessibility, and there's a lot of agitation about providing full captioning on everything, and real-time captioning, and there's crowd captioning and automated captioning. I'm just surprised at something like AARP, and I don't know who else might not actually be supporting it. Okay, and this one, how many of you here have heard of mosquito ringtones? How many of you here can hear mosquito ringtones? Okay. There were some hands and now there are not, but I know that people were covering their ears when we did this before. I will. All right. So I found out about mosquito ringtones when a young coworker came into my office with his new iPhone. I was like, "Can you hear this?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Can you hear this?" And I said, "No." He's like, "This is so cool." So apparently, my understanding from my teenage daughters is that it was developed, or whatever. Students in the classroom, they get texts, they get phone messages, they use mosquito ringtones because their teachers cannot hear them. And this is true. This is true. So here's a mosquito ringtone at 8 kilohertz. Everybody, if it works. Where's my little guy? Doesn't have the slider thing. Okay. Everybody without a hearing impairment should be able to hear this if it's working. Yes. Okay. All right. The rest shouldn't be that bad. People under 50 should be able to hear this one. It's at 12 kilohertz. See? Some people are amazing. I have to check with my kids to see if I can't hear it at all. And I'm sorry, but if you're awesome, you can hear this one too. This is under 20 at 16 kilohertz. Anybody hear it? Oh, look at this. This is good. And I understand from my colleague that some 7-Elevens use this as a teenage deterrent. They play it at the doors. Is that right?
Prevent loitering?
Loitering, yeah. Or maybe to prevent entry. I don't know. But
That's true.
yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Also, certain buildings that have skateboard problems will play it out in loudspeakers, like skateboarders that they don't want.
Do you want me to repeat it?
Their stairs and their.
So people at skateboard parks use it?
Not at skateboard parks. Like, say you're like.
Oh.
The IBM building in Chicago, for example, is a very modernist building. It has some awesome skateboarding.
Sorry.
We want people to be able to hear this later. Time deprived.
So mosquito ringtones are also used as deterrents to get teenagers away. And an example of that not only is the 7-Eleven, but also, for example, the IBM building in Chicago. It's a skyscraper with these great railings and stairs that you can skateboard on. And what they've done is they've affixed under the kind of the Mies overhang, they've affixed loudspeakers that no one can hear what's coming out of them except for teenagers, so that they're driven away and they don't skateboard on the railings and stairs.
It's not for pigeons or anything, huh?
No,
Yes.
it's for kids, trust me.
So I guess the only usability clue here is if you only want your under 20 or people with superior hearing skills to hear something, use those as your error tones. But if you want other people to hear it, please don't. Okay. All right, so this is a sort of summary table, the impacts of all these age-related changes on website interactions, such as low contrast, sensitivity, and color perceptions makes it harder to see links and read text. Reduced dexterity makes it harder to manipulate or click small targets. If you have cognitive issues such as you're more distractible or it's harder for you to learn and remember new skills, then it's going to be harder to filter out all those colors and calls to action, or it's going to be harder to master a novel website, new interactions or technologies. Not that we're saying, oh, everything should stay exactly the same it was 10 years ago, and combinations of any of these disabilities or impairments means that it's going to be that much harder along the whole spectrum here. 10 years ago, Microsoft came up with Microsoft did a study, a Microsoft accessibility study, and they said by the time we reach our 50s, 2/3 of us have vision, hearing, or dexterity impairments that will affect our computer use. And I don't know, I honestly don't know. I suspect it's still the same depending on the platform. You're using Siri, or you have an iPad, or you have a smartphone or something. I think the issues are still going to be there. Okay, and then my last slide is some of the behavioral characteristics that we observed in our teaching of, tutoring, and doing usability studies with older people. Well, as you might expect, not everybody, but many of them have less computer experience. We observed a lot of cases of change blindness, and this was very important in our travel website study because they would say, I want to add on these trips or change these dates. And meanwhile, over on the right, the prices are changing, and they didn't see it. It was in tiny little letters on the right, and it wasn't front and center for them. I think it's been pointed out in other literature that they're risk averse. People are afraid of breaking something, and they often, I got these little old ladies who go, what should I do next? Is this what I want to click? Do I enter this here? And I have, as a usability person, you're like, yeah, just go ahead and try it. But they were very tentative about it. Also, they would read everything on the page. And on pages for travel websites where it was everybody's reviews of a trip, they would read all the reviews of a trip before they'd say, no, they didn't want to do that. And I think also there was a very real fear of embarrassment, of making a mistake. Not so much breaking it, but making a mistake and looking foolish in front of a younger person or a more experienced person. The reluctance to give personal information, that doesn't surprise you because you think, of course, they didn't want to get hacked, they didn't want someone stealing their credit card, but what it was is they didn't want to get spammed. They didn't want to be on someone's mailing list and get emails and newsletters and things. And I don't know if they weren't even thinking about getting hacked, but they just didn't want to open themselves up to that. And also it's been reported older people tend to blame themselves instead of the interface. But we had a number of people who said, I wouldn't even go on a trip with these people. Look at this website, If they can't do better on a website, then. So I thought a lot of people were very strident in their opinions about the web developers, the business behind it and stuff. We were kind of surprised about that. All right. So I will now turn things over to Jeff, who's going to discuss design guidelines and present some examples of things. And right, get
Thank you.
myself out of your way.
My water. I forgot my water. Didn't somebody in Congress get in trouble for drinking water on camera? I don't know why that was. Okay. So my assignment, well, you all appreciated this cartoon, right? Okay. Some of us more than others, yes. Well, as she pointed out, I've been giving BayCHI talks since 1989, so that should tell you something. Is there anyone in this room that wasn't born in 1989? There you go. So I'm old, officially old. Okay, so there are we have compiled on our website at wiserusability.com. There's a resources page, and on that resources page are a bunch of resources for finding out the guidelines for designing for older adults. And we have compiled our own set of guidelines, some of which I'm going to present to you right now, but they're on the website in full if you want to get them there. But these are compiled from a variety of sources, which I'll give you at the end, but they include AARP, W3C, they have a special, it's WAI, what's that called? Web Accessibility Age Initiative, yeah. So, and so they're compiled from a variety of sources. Okay, so we're going to talk about graphic and visual design, ergonomics, navigation, focus, and guidance, content writing, and general accessibility. And I'll give you some examples of each one. So, graphic and visual design guidelines. There's a whole bunch of guidelines, but I'm not going to talk about them all because we don't have time. Displaying text in large, dark colors on light, non-pattern backgrounds. So, here's an example of what not to do. So here's the American Society on Aging's website, and they have black text on white background, which is good, but they also have this text, which if you've got the glare sensitivity that Kate just showed earlier, you may not be able to read. So the contrast here between the white and the light blue is just simply not enough. And in fact, if you run this page through an accessibility checker, it will tell you that. Here we have Cassandra Bay Hotel website. There's some text here. Can everyone see it? Not everyone is going to be able to see that text. The contrast is low. And then we've got here text over patterned backgrounds, which makes it difficult to read. The Westchester Public and Private Partnership for Aging Services, they're using on dark blue on dark gray, which actually causes some oscillation in the visual system. So that's not a good combination, but it's also too low contrast. And then there's white on gray, which is not optimal. The Murcia City Tourist Board, there's a title here. This is actually the main title on the page, which you can't see. So this is where your eye goes when you look at this page, when in fact it's meant to go here. But there's not enough contrast there for you to draw your eye. And then up at the top here, I don't know if you noticed that there is a whole line of text that stretches from right here to over here. Okay, so that's another example of low contrast. And again, if you run this through an accessibility checker, it will tell you that. Now here's a good example. This page has plenty of contrast, and relatively few calls to action, and lots of what I call user focus. So this is an example of a well-designed website for seniors and, in fact, for everyone. Okay, so now let's look at the one that you're probably most familiar with when we're talking about designing for elder adults. Avoid tiny fonts and provide a visible way to resize text. So it used to be if you went to the Social Security online website and you thought that the text was too small, and why would anyone think that? I don't know. But anyway, if you thought that the text was too small and you notice down here at the bottom, there's a little sign here that says, need larger text? I just made it bigger so that you could see it. Okay, it's actually down there at the bottom of the page, and I think the bottom of the screen is kind of cut off, but you can't really see it. But it's down there in tiny text, so maybe you wouldn't see it, maybe you wouldn't. But let's make it bigger so that we can see it. So now what do you think would happen if you clicked that? The text might get larger. No, sorry. No, what happens if you click that is instructions come on to tell you how in your browser you can go to the control panel of your browser and make it, depending on what browser you have, you might be able to make it bigger and, of course, back out, right? That's what most people are going to do. Now, they fixed this. So this is a few years ago. So they have fixed it. So now the Social Security site actually starts with larger text. That's good. And they have this thing up here at the top, which is what we're saying that you should have. Basically, you click on here, and this comes down, which size text do you want? Standard, medium, or large? And it works, so it's good. At the NIH Senior Health, and all these sites I'm showing you are actually designed so that seniors can use them. So here we have this text resizer, which is good. And if you click it, the text gets bigger. That's good. Now, what you'll notice at some sites is if you click it, the text gets bigger and the whole page falls apart. But not here, so that's actually good. All right, so that's graphic and visual design guidelines. Let's talk now about ergonomic guidelines. And we'll talk about these two sort of together. On-screen controls should accept clicks anywhere on the control, including the label. Make clicks targets large and space them apart. These two guidelines together are essentially trying to make the targets bigger and easier to discriminate physically for the user. Some of the users in our senior travel study actually had tremors, and so they had trouble hitting targets that were small. So let's look at now. Here's the AARP's. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is the Aging in America, American Society for Aging conference in 2011, and their site has these huge buttons over on the left, which are the navigation for the site. But in fact, you have to click on the link, the text. You have to click on the text. Clicking over here does absolutely nothing. Okay, so bad graphic design and poor click targets. There's a wonderful site for women over 50 that has the strange name of Vibrant Nation. We won't go further into that, but anyway, so they have a free report that you should get, and then there's a little close button down here on the left, which actually, if you click on the X, it won't close. Nothing happens. So you have to actually click on the word close. So it's making the click target unnecessarily small. The design guideline is that if you have a control, like a radio button or a checkbox, I should be able to click anywhere having anything to do with that, the checkbox, the label, anywhere close to it. So here's a page that has some nice size click targets, and in fact, you can click anywhere on this button. There's a big button. You can click anywhere on that. There's a big text field. You can click anywhere on that. So this is a well-designed website, and that's a good thing because they're actually trying to make money off of seniors. And if you want to make money off of seniors, you want to make them successful when they use your website. All right, avoid walking or pull right menus is another ergonomic guideline. You know what walking or pull right menus are. They're hierarchical menus where you pull down, then you pull over to the right, and then another menu appears off to the right, which you then can select an item from, or maybe you have to pull off to the right from that to select a secondary submenu. So I'm going to show you a little video clip from a travel study that we did of seniors. And this will show someone trying to use pull right menus. At this point in the study, what she's doing is we're at the end of the study, and she's trying to explain to us what she did earlier. She's trying to go back and explain something to us, okay?
So like when I went up here to, to get the country first, I went up here to go to, go up here to this bouncing around Kenya thing here. Okay, so I went in here, down to Africa. It's taken me like 5 times to click on the country.
Okay, so she was trying to hit Kenya on a submenu, so what it was requiring her is to move in an exactly horizontal line. If she went anywhere off a horizontal, the menu would disappear. Very frustrating, especially if you have a tremor, or even if you don't have a tremor, your movement acuity might not be that good. And of course, even Fitt's law just tells us for anyone, you want to make movement and click targets large. And then there are some navigation guidelines, like providing a clear link to the home from all other pages. We have here Grand Circle Cruise Line, Grand Circle Travel, which is actually one site with 2 names, which is kind of confusing in itself. But we ran a study of this site, among others, and when we asked people to go back to the home page, they suddenly noticed that there was no in the main primary navigation, there's no link to the home page. Well, then you're supposed to know that you click on the logo of the site. But in this case, which logo? And because of short-term memory problems, some people they would click on this one and then they would go to a home page, and then they would go somewhere else and they click on this one. And in fact, they'd go to the same home page, but some pictures might have changed in the meantime, and they wouldn't recognize it as the same place. Now, in contrast, here's another site which has its own problems, but it actually is good in the sense that it always, most of the time, it had a clear link back to home. There was navigating the site. Our users were able to find their way back to home, unless they were ordering, and they were actually booking a trip. Once you get into the booking trip wizard, there was a wizard for booking a trip. Once you got into that wizard, there was this whole nav bar went away. It wasn't there. But in particular, there was no home link. And so once they booked a trip, they couldn't get back to here without closing the browser, opening the browser, typing in again the name of the site. And then there are guidelines for content and writing, such as using plain language or avoiding technical jargon. So at Citibank, if you log in, you log out, and it's still got your cookie, and you try to log in again, this is what you get. You have exceeded the maximum concurrent sessions allowed. What? Okay, so, I'm a geek, so I know what this means, but my grandmother might not know what that means. And it can actually be fairly subtle. I mean, this is pretty blatant, but this is actually a much more subtle example. We're at a grocery store, fresh and easy. Please select the following fields from your receipt. Okay, so you have to be careful when you're writing messages, because we are so into design and software that we think that the terms that we use every day are actually part of the normal language. But to an elderly person, fields means a place where you pick daisies, right? It doesn't mean something that you type into. So you have to be really, somebody at your company has to be really carefully going through every message to make sure that jargon doesn't sneak in. Here's another example. This is a ski resort site. Would you like to visit our interactive map or our zoomable map? Wait, isn't a zoomable map also interactive? So they've made, inside their company, they've made a distinction. They've arbitrarily called one the interactive map and the other one the zoomable map, and they're going to tell us to use those terms.
It's a conceptual problem. It's a user model problem.
Yes, right. It's exposing the conceptual model. It's exposing concepts which shouldn't be exposed to the users. And I actually have a book about that topic, which is out there on the table. We'll talk about that later. So here's an example of some good content writing, which is at southwest.com. What happened? The departure date for the return flight is prior to the departure date for the outbound flight. What you need to do, go back to the previous page and modify your selection. Now, I've only excerpted part of the page, and so there actually is a back button so that you can actually get back there. So this is a well-designed, non-jargony message. So that's that content guideline. And then there's some general accessibility guidelines, which I won't go into and illustrate, but they are on our site. But the general idea is that of all these accessibility guidelines is that your site should be oriented around content, around semantic content, and presentation should be handled in CSS or something, so that the browser, regardless of whether a person is viewing it on a laptop or a pad computer or an iPad, an iPhone, it will display in some sensible way. Okay, and so based on our studies with users, who are of a certain age, as we put it. What we have found are these recommendations for actually doing usability testing with older adults. Test at the participant's site if you can. Be very sensitive to security and privacy concerns because they have a lot of them. Don't have 2 and 3 hour sessions. That won't work. Keep the audio and visual distractions down. Use their computer if you can. You'd be surprised that even if they use a Macintosh and you bring in your Mac, this isn't my computer. I don't know how to use it. The buttons are not the same. I can't figure out how to get to Google. Get me to Google. Okay. Don't speak in computer web jargon. Could you just click on that dialogue there and tell me what you see? What? Don't say that. Okay. So don't speak in web jargon. Be very patient and respectful. Sometimes it's very painful and hard, but then again, I'm starting to realize that I'm getting into that category, and sometimes when my nephew tries to explain stuff to me, he rolls his eyes. Offer to explain things after the session. So often one of the things that a senior or an older adult will perceive as a benefit of having participated in this study is that when they're through, they actually might know more about Google than they do before. And that actually they might see as an more important benefit than the little bit of money or compensation that you're going to offer them. But the trouble is you need, for the purposes of your study, to put that off to the end. Okay, yes, I can answer your questions, but I'll answer them at the end. And then if you can, a lot of these people are on fixed income, so it's very small compensations are much appreciated. So we do gift certificates from stores. And in fact, we do gift certificates. We just tell them, what store do you want a gift certificate from? And then we go and get it. Our website has a bunch of resources at wiserusability.com. There's some guidelines that are our own, this list that I just showed you. There are links to the guidelines from the W3C, the NIA, National Institute on Aging, and the AARP and other organizations. There are a bunch of organizations, links to organizations that focus on technology and older adults. There are online website accessibility checkers that you can run a website through, and they give you back a list of problems that your website or the specific page has. There's a bunch of published literature, and there's some blogs on our site. So I encourage you to go there. All right, so thank you very much, and we'll take your questions. And the other thing I'll mention is, this is a shameless plug, is that I have, this is not a talk based on any book, but I have written a bunch of books on user interface design, various topics, and they're out in the back, and if anyone wants to look at them, they can, or buy them. They can buy them from me. And with that, Kate and I will take your questions. Sure.
So obviously, a lot of these things that you're suggesting for older people are good for any website. But my question for you is there a point, when is the point when you would need to design a completely different site for an older person? You know, like where the interface just has like 2 main buttons on the page, and I mean, is that ever in a consideration that you just have to? Is there a point or a process where you'd have to just create a completely different website?
I wouldn't recommend that, but there are some third-party things that are platforms, and they're touch screens, and it says photo, email, search, play games.
Yeah, if you go to Google and you Google computers for seniors, there are a number of different products that have been developed that are basically a screen, and as she said, it's just divided into sections. There are no windows on it. It's just that there are no overlapping windows. There's just, here's your email. Click on this, you get to your email. Here's your, what are the things that seniors want to do? Well, they want to, share pictures with their family. They want to use email. They want to shop. They want to search for health information, as Kate said earlier. Those things are all provided in a canned sort of fixed way, and then you can use those. But my understanding is that those systems are very seldom, they're not that popular. Most seniors go and either they buy or their family buys them a laptop or an iPad or something, and they just deal with it. So, but to answer your question, before Google existed, there was Yahoo and Excite and Alta Vista and all these websites that had a huge number of calls to action on the home page, and seniors found them overwhelming. And then Google came along and said, no, we're not going to do it that way, we're going to do it a different way. And a lot of seniors say, just get me to Google. I know what to do in Google. So you don't necessarily have to design different systems. You can design one system that everyone can use.
Could you talk about designing for glare sensitivity and contrast sensitivity? Is just black text on a bright background good design, or are there other considerations?
There's kind of some religious debate about that, as there is about so much of things. I'm a big proponent of black text. I've actually read research that says that white background is too glary and you want to use an off-white. And I know that I don't know the specifics of it, but Apple has a lot of accessibility settings, and I'm sure other platforms do too. I don't know how far those go to remediate those kinds of things, but one thing that you see a lot of gamer sites and artist sites, they have tiny, tiny little white font on a black background, and I don't know that I could have read it when I was 20, but I certainly can't read it now. I think black text, certainly very dark text on a light background, but not totally white background.
The boldness also matters, because if you just have a really thin font and it's bright white background, then as soon as glare comes up, then the text basically disappears. But if the text is bolder, then the white doesn't bleed into the text as much. The same refers in video reversed, as she says, white text on a black background, the black can bleed into the white and make the text actually look smaller than it actually is. So basically dark text on a light background is the guideline, but also large and bold.
So some of the online checkers for contrast checkers, they will say this is okay if your font is 12 point. This is not okay if your font is 12 point bold, or if your font is 10 point. They will break it out like that for you, so that's very helpful. Free online checkers for that. There's a question here.
And a question over here. I'm going to go back to this gentleman's question earlier. There's a disconnect between what's cool and perhaps what's age appropriate. And Kate, you mentioned earlier that all age demographics seem to be using the web in similar ways, irregardless of age. So, are you advocating a single design spectrum for all users? Because what is most legible for an older person is often going to be not very desirable for a younger person.
Right.
So, are we talking about perhaps a system whereby a user can choose to view a website in an age-appropriate way before they actually get on it?
Yeah. There's something called adaptive interfaces, and I don't mean adaptive like responsive. Thank you. And I don't know enough about them to know how they work. I don't know if they're like a learning system that says, boy, this person cannot read this text, so I'm going to adjust it.
It has to do with the browser width.
The browser width?
Yeah.
An adaptive interface, not a responsive
Oh, no,
interface?
adaptive, yes, you're okay.
Yeah. So I think that there's some, AI or some heuristic going on underneath there, that it does adjust to the person's ability and expectations. What I think is kind of I don't know if this is the right or the wrong way to start it, but do you think, are you going to start with the lowest common denominator and make it more complex and more interesting and have more features tucked away in hidden things? Or are you going to start with the opposite end of it and dumb it down as you need to? Because nobody wants to think that they're using a dumbed down version of anything.
One way to put it is that we're looking for the online version of curb cuts. You know, curb cuts were put in sidewalks in cities under law to allow people with wheelchairs to get around. But 1% or less of the use of curb cuts has to do with is by people with wheelchairs. Most of it's people pushing shopping carts and strollers and roller bags around town, okay? So we're looking for things that you can do that make something easier to use for seniors and easier to use for others as well. Now, one of the things I will point out is that some people who work in senior centers have found it useful to teach seniors how to spoof their browser, how to set up their browser so that it tells the website that they go to that they're mobile. So what happens is they get served a mobile site on a big browser screen, which they go, yes, now we're talking, you know. And so, but you have to actually spoof it, you know, in order to get that to happen. But you see, when you look at a website, designers cram in a whole bunch of stuff onto a home page or various other pages. But when they have to design for a phone, they have to make some serious choices about what's important and what's not so important. And so then they display only the essential stuff on that mobile site, and that's what seniors need. So that's one thing that you can do, is you can spoof the browser so that it thinks that it's getting a mobile site.
Seniors and some of those other populations too.
I wanted to return to the text question, just to make the comment that different fonts have different readability as well. Yes. And if you can control the font, you should pay attention to that. It's easy to learn about it, X height and all those things. So that isn't, that's another consideration.
Right, and yeah, my book, Designing with the Mind in Mind, talks about that a little bit.
Do you have any numbers on how many elderly people are using screen readers, and any thoughts on designing for the screen reader experience?
I could Google it, but I don't think we have any.
No, I mean, we obviously, people who are legally blind use screen readers a lot, and there's actually variability between screen readers, but there are a bunch of things on that accessibility guidelines page that I showed earlier that you should do to make your site more workable for screen readers. But the overarching guideline is to basically encode your website in terms of its semantics, not in terms of its appearance, because table-based layout and other fixed HTML layout things can screw up a screen reader. Whereas if it's all just divs and the positioning of the divs is decided in CSS, then the screen reader can actually make a lot more sense of the page.
I would have another response to the one you just mentioned. And you probably are familiar with the fact that the National Library for the Blind is part of the Library of Congress and shares magazines and books on tape specifically recorded for blind people. And the interesting thing is, in the interest of copyright protection, they send them out in a different, using a different recording playback machine and so on, which people then have to learn a new interface, and it doesn't have the standard symbols to represent play and backup and so on. So there are competing interests.
I'll add to that there's one of the accessibility guidelines is skip nav, right? So, I mean, how many of you have ever used tried to use a screen reader. Okay, so basically what
That was a
happens is...
1.
Huh?
Oh, 2, sorry. Oh,
So what happens is if you don't have skip nav, and skip nav allows a screen reader to skip around the navigation on the page, because obviously every page has the same navigation, and so what you get is a blind person going from on the home page and they hear, home, about us, contact us, blah, 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 and then they finally get to the content, and then they click on a link and it goes to another page and it says home, about us, blah, 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 blah again. So why not just skip that? And so there is a way to make your site, allow the screen reader to get around that.
I was thinking about when you were talking and giving examples, and this relates to something someone said about designing a senior-specific UI. The thing about there being a home button, and the thing about knowing how to resize your font with, Command plus and Command minus. Of the people that we used in the participants in our travel website study, only one person knew to go to the logo for a home page and how to use the Command plus and Command minus.
out of how many?
Out of 9 we had, and she was a computer teacher. She was a 55-year-old computer teacher. But the other people, well, no, I guess 2. But the other people were completely, proficient in doing all this stuff online. They were so happy when we told them after the session, well, this is how you do this in the future. I'm like, oh, I never knew that. And I know that designers don't want to have to clutter up their website with a superfluous homepage and text resizing widgets and things. I don't know what the solution is to that, because are you going to carry over those sort of dinosaur, eventually there'll be dinosaur widgets, or are you going to leave people behind? Because I think one thing, I don't know if I explicitly stated it, but the older users and all those other similar populations with low vision, low literacy, low computer expertise, and second language learners, they're disproportionately affected by poor design. It just is that much more of an impediment to them. It's not something like, oh, I'll just call somebody and figure it out, or I'll try this and this and figure it out. It really can stop them in their tracks. So there's still some work to be done on figuring out a nice, smooth path to make it easier for them.
And one thing to keep in mind is that, and this is important for all of us here in this room, regardless of our age, to keep in mind is, well, Kate and I hear all the time when we were talking to prospective clients, well, we just have to, our design's fine, we just have to wait for all those old people to die off, and then it'll be, everything will be okay.
Because we know how to use it. We
know how to use it, so when they all die off, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But that's just wrong, because
on so many levels.
What will happen? No, I mean it's not only morally wrong, but I mean it's actually factually wrong, because basically there's a guy over at Stanford named Robert Sapolsky, and he does research on he's a brain scientist and also an endocrinologist. And one of the things that he talks about is how people get stuck at some point in their life. So basically he's done research on if you haven't eaten sushi by the time you're 25, you're never going to like sushi entire life. If you don't like hard rock when you're 25 years old, you will not like it when you're 45 years old. And so basically people get stuck in a lot of things, and computer technology is another one. And so the people in this room who are in their 20s, when they grow up and they have children and grandchildren, their grandchildren are going to be saying to them, Grandma, why do you keep Facebooking me? I don't use Facebook. I use whatever it is, 27 years from now. So just keep that in mind, that it's not going to be that once the old people die off, the problem is going to be solved.
Hi, I was just wondering if you know the background for how the gray text started to become so prevalent on the websites. Was that being taught somewhere, or how did that come about?
I think it's a terrorist plot.
No, well, I mean, one possibility is that, you know, it has been said that pure white is too bright. And there's some evidence for that, but so off-whites are.
But it's
but
text,
that's
so
the
gray
background.
text.
So the gray text.
Can we bring up a website here?
I'm not connected into Wi-Fi.
Because the other thing is this is the problem on the iPads. I don't know how it started, but on the iPads, there are gray, the buttons and things are gray on a black background, and many of my clients can't see it. And then even on the Google's home page, just their search page, their menu bar is black with gray font on it. And I, you know, late at night, I'm going, I don't know what that says. So I think it's just a design trend, like the white, tiny little white font on a black background.
Yeah, I mean, there are styles, there are fashions in web design. I mean, you know, 10 years ago, navigation was down the left side. It was actually called the L, right? It was navigation, primary navigation down the left and secondary navigation across the top. Now it's the other way around.
One reason is that when you print,
Daniel.
page. One reason is when you print color, you know, on a laser printer in your house or something, and it's not color, you're going to get all these different shades of gray. If you just stick with gray in the beginning, then you can see contrast and you can better determine how it's going to print on a black and white printer. In my world, that is one. For instance, when I design a logo, I will design it in gray because I want to see the contrast, and I don't want the client to suggest what the colors are. So I think it comes from a need to see what it's like in print form.
Okay, but then you don't
to online
actually add the colors later once you've decided.
Well, I think there's just like a scale, a legibility scale.
You know, I mean, I agree with the idea that you should flatten your website into grayscale to see what it looks like to someone who's using a display that's, you know, like, for example, maybe using a Kindle. But that doesn't really account for, you know, gray text on a white background in many websites.
Well, I like it, the example I like is Skype. I teach at Avenidas also, and people always want to learn how to Skype their grandkids, and they have to get a Skype sign up. I mean, they have to sign up and get a Skype account. And it's like a mystery, you know, it's written in invisible ink or something. You cannot see you can't tell the different areas of it, you can't tell where a field begins and ends, and the labels for the fields, they're invisible. And I think
so So I think we better call it. Is there
two more
got
questions?
one more question?
Two more questions.
Okay, because people are going to have to start leaving. So.
So my question is, basically, what constitutes as overwhelming? Is it usually the amount of content or the amount of content per square area, or is it the number of calls to action? How do you know which variable is going to create this sense of overwhelmingness?
Well, I guess what I would say, as you know, someone who's not only a web designer but also a cognitive scientist, is that it's not just how many calls to action there are or how many links there are on a page. It's how well the page is designed in terms of directing the user's attention to the important calls of action or the important links. So, for example, if I have a page that's a long list of readings of books, let's say, you know, that's a different thing from a page where when I go to the home page, I don't know whether they want me to buy an airline ticket here or to buy an airline ticket here. Where do I start to buy an airline ticket? If that's not clear, see, the user comes with a goal. They have a goal in their head. And all they have to go on, they don't know what the designer had in mind. All they have to go on is what's on the screen. And they have to match the goal in their head to what's on the screen. So they're scanning the screen, and as Kate said, older adults spend much more time scanning the screen than younger ones, but they're scanning the screen to try to find a match with what's in their head. And if there are 4 things on the screen that match their goal, they're stuck.
They're not going to just click on one. They're going to try and figure out which is the rest.
They're going to try to figure out the right one. A younger person might go, I'll just try this one and see what happens. a senior is not going to do that.
The other answer to your question is usability testing. Sorry. Yeah.
I may have an insight on the light gray background
Okay.
thing. Dyslexia. There have apparently been tests saying that dyslexics do better with a less high contrast environment and also without full justification.
Okay, that's a new one to me.
Dyslexics or autistics?
Dyslexics.
Okay?
All right.
Any other questions? If not, we'll... Okay, thank you very much.